My name is Sarah Richardson, and this is the story of how I lost everything. And found what I thought was gone forever. It was a cold October afternoon in Seattle. The funeral home was packed with people dressed in black, all there to say goodbye to my husband, David. He'd been killed 3 days earlier by a drunk driver on Interstate 5. Just like that, in an instant, he was gone. I sat in the front row, staring at his portrait. That warm smile frozen in time. Those kind eyes looking out at everyone who'd come to pay their respects. People kept coming up to me, squeezing my hand. Saying things like, "I'm so sorry," and, "He was such a good man." I just nodded. I couldn't really feel anything. It was like I was watching someone else's life from far away. The service was almost over when something happened that changed everything. There was a commotion at the entrance. Everyone turned to look. A group of people had arrived, and you could tell immediately they were important. Expensive suits. Confident walk. The kind of people who command attention just by entering a room. But one man in particular caught my eye. He was in his late 30s, tall. Wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Dark hair perfectly styled. He walked with the kind of confidence that comes from real power and success. But that's not what made me freeze. As he turned his head to speak to someone, I saw it. 3 small freckles behind his left ear, arranged in a perfect triangle. My heart stopped. I knew that birthmark. I had kissed it goodnight 1,000 times when he was little. I had traced it with my finger when he couldn't sleep. That birthmark belonged to my son, Michael. Michael, who disappeared 15 years ago. During a backpacking trip in Southeast Asia. He was 22 years old, fresh out of college, excited to see the world. We got one postcard from Thailand saying he was having an amazing time. And then, nothing. Silence. He vanished completely. We searched everywhere. Police. Private investigators. Embassies in 3 countries. David spent years and most of our life savings trying to find him. But Michael was gone, as if he'd never existed. And now, impossibly, he was here. Standing in the funeral home. At his own father's funeral. Alive. My hands went cold. My vision narrowed. I gripped the arm of my chair to keep from falling. Was I hallucinating? Was grief making me see things that weren't there? But no. I watched him walk up to David's portrait and bow his head respectfully. I could see his face clearly now. Older, more mature, but it was him. The same nose. The same jawline. The same way he held his shoulders. It was Michael, my son. I saw him hand a business card to one of the funeral home staff. I strained to see what it said. And when the staff member turned, I caught a glimpse. James Chen, CEO, Summit Construction Group. James Chen. The name was wrong, but everything else was right. How was this possible? I forced myself to stand, even though my legs were shaking. I had to talk to him. I had to know. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to him. My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Excuse me, sir?" He turned around, and suddenly we were face to face. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. But when he looked at me, there was nothing. No recognition. No warmth. He looked at me like I was a complete stranger. "Yes?" His voice was cultured, professional. "Can I help you?" "I'm Sarah Richardson," I managed to say. "David was my husband." How did you know him?" His expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm so very sorry for your loss. Your husband was an exceptional man. We were business associates. He consulted on several of my company's projects over the past few months. His expertise in structural engineering was invaluable." "You're James Chen?" I studied his face, desperately, searching for any sign that he knew me. "That's correct. Summit Construction Group." He extended his hand formally, and I shook it. His grip was firm and completely impersonal. "How long had you known David?" I asked. Not long, I'm afraid. About 3 months. We only worked together briefly. But he made a significant impact on our downtown development project. 3 months. Only 3 months. And in that time, had David realized who this man was? Before I could ask anything else, a woman in a sharp suit appeared beside him. Mr. Chen, I apologize for interrupting, but we really must leave. You have the city council meeting in 40 minutes. He checked his expensive watch and nodded. Then he turned back to me. Mrs. Richardson, please accept my deepest condolences. Your husband spoke very highly of you. I hope you find peace in this difficult time. Wait, I started to say, but he was already turning away, his entourage moving with him toward the exit. I stood there, frozen, watching him leave. Michael, I whispered. Michael, please. But he didn't turn around. He just walked out the door and disappeared. I stood there with tears streaming down my face, while everyone around me assumed I was crying for David. And I was. But I was also crying for Michael. For the son I'd just found and lost again in the space of 5 minutes. That night, alone in our house that felt too big and too quiet, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth about James Chen. I was going to discover if he was really my son. And if he was, I was going to find out why he'd let us believe he was dead for 15 years. Whatever it took, however long it took, I would have answers. The next week was a blur. I barely slept. I spent every waking moment researching James Chen online. And what I found was incredible. Summit Construction was one of the biggest development companies in Seattle. They were building half the downtown waterfront. Articles praised James as a visionary, a young CEO who'd achieved massive success. Business magazines featured him on their covers. But here's what was strange: his past only went back 4 years. Every article, every profile started with him arriving in Seattle 4 years ago. With foreign investment money and an impressive track record of successful projects in Southeast Asia. But before that, nothing. It was as if James Chen didn't exist before 4 years ago. Or as if he'd been someone else entirely. I pulled out my old photo albums, the ones I hadn't been able to look at for years. Pictures of Michael at his high school graduation. Michael in college. Michael the day before he left for his trip, backpack over his shoulder, so excited about his adventure. I held recent magazine photos of James Chen next to my pictures of Michael. The resemblance wasn't just similar. It was identical. The same person, just 15 years older. I was absolutely certain. I called Summit Construction and tried to get an appointment. His assistant very politely told me Mr. Chen's calendar was booked for the next 2 months. When I said I was David Richardson's widow, there was a pause, but then just a vague promise to see what could be arranged. Fine. I would go there in person. The next morning, I put on my best black suit, did my hair and makeup, and drove downtown to Summit Construction's headquarters. It was a gleaming glass tower that made me feel small and out of place. But I walked through those revolving doors anyway. The lobby was all marble and steel and important-looking people hurrying to important meetings. I felt old and foolish. But I walked up to the reception desk anyway. I'd like to see James Chen, please. The young receptionist smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? No, but I'm Sarah Richardson. My husband David Richardson worked with Mr. Chen. I need to speak with him about an urgent personal matter. She made a phone call, and a few minutes later, a professional woman in her 30s appeared, the same assistant from the funeral. Mrs. Richardson, I remember you. I'm so sorry for your loss. But Mr. Chen's schedule today is completely booked. I'd be happy to set up an appointment for next week. It really can't wait, I said. Please. She was about to respond when the elevator doors opened, and James Chen stepped out with several executives. They were deep in discussion about zoning permits and construction timelines. Then he saw me. He stopped mid-sentence. For a moment, we just stared at each other across that fancy lobby. Then he said something quiet to his team and walked toward me. "Mrs. Richardson." His voice was neutral, professional. "This is unexpected. I'm sorry for coming without an appointment. But I really need to talk to you." His jaw tightened. After a moment, he nodded. "Come up to my office." His assistant looked shocked, but he ignored her. The elevator ride was silent and awkward. When we got to his office, this beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, he gestured to a leather sofa. "Please, sit. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. This was it. 15 years ago, my son Michael disappeared. He was 22, on a backpacking trip through Thailand and Vietnam. We got one postcard, and then he was gone. Just vanished. We searched for years. The police searched. Private investigators searched. We never found him. We never even found a body. James's expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw his fingers tighten on the arm of his chair. "I'm very sorry to hear that," he said carefully. "But I still don't understand what this has to do with me." I reached into my purse with trembling hands and pulled out the photos I'd brought. "This is Michael at his college graduation." I put the first photo on the coffee table between us. He was studying engineering, like his father. And this is from a family vacation, 2 years before he disappeared. And this is from the day before he left on his trip. I watched his face as he looked at the photos. His expression stayed controlled, but something flickered in his eyes. "I can see why you might think there's a resemblance," he said slowly. "But lots of people look similar." "The birthmark," I interrupted. "Behind your left ear. 3 freckles in a triangle." Michael had the exact same mark from birth. The doctors said it was extremely rare, a congenital pigmentation anomaly that occurs in less than 1 in a million people. His hand moved unconsciously toward his ear. Then he caught himself and stood up abruptly, walking to the window with his back to me. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, and now his voice was hard. "I understand you've suffered terrible losses. First your son, now your husband. I can't imagine that pain. But this," he turned to face me. "This is not uncommon." "What do you mean?" "Wealthy people attract a certain kind of attention. People come forward all the time claiming to be long-lost relatives, hoping for money. It's happened to me 3 times since I moved to Seattle. Each time, the story was compelling. Each time, there were photographs and emotional appeals. And each time, it turned out to be a scam." I felt like he'd slapped me. "You think I'm trying to con you? I think you're a grieving woman who's desperate to believe her son is alive. And you're looking at me and seeing what you want to see. Then take a DNA test with me," I challenged. "If I'm wrong, I'll never bother you again. If you're right, then what?" His voice rose. "Then I'm supposed to believe my entire identity is a lie? That I'm someone I've never heard of? Mrs. Richardson, I know who I am. I'm James Chen. I built my business from the ground up. I have a wife and a son. I have a life. A life that only exists in records from 4 years ago," I pressed. I looked. "There's nothing about you before that. It's like you didn't exist." His face went carefully blank. Too blank. "My early career was overseas in countries with poor record keeping," he said stiffly. "That's not unusual." We stood there at an impasse. Finally, he sighed and rubbed his face. "Mrs. Richardson, Sarah, I can see that you genuinely believe what you're saying. But I'm not your son. I'm sorry." His assistant appeared at the door. I realized I was being dismissed. "Please," I tried one more time. "Just think about it." But he'd already picked up his phone, moving on to his next task. "Goodbye, Mrs. Richardson." As the elevator took me back down to the lobby, I felt tears of frustration burning my eyes. But I also felt more certain than ever. He'd been too defensive, too quick to explain away the gaps in his past. And that unconscious reach toward his ear when I mentioned the birthmark that had been real. James Chen might not remember being Michael Richardson. But they were the same person. I was sure of it. Something had happened to him 15 years ago, something that made him forget his old life completely. And I was going to find out what. 3 days went by with no word from James Chen. I didn't expect any. But I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the mystery, about my son who didn't remember me. Then, on the 4th day, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Richardson? This is Lisa Park from Summit Construction. Mr. Chen would like to speak with you. Would you be available to come to his office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I almost dropped the phone. Yes, absolutely. I barely slept that night, wondering what he wanted to say. Had he thought about what I'd told him? Was he starting to believe me? When I arrived at his office the next morning, James looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair slightly messy. Tie loosened. This wasn't the composed CEO I'd seen before. This was a man under enormous stress. Mrs. Richardson, thank you for coming. His voice was hoarse. Please, sit down. I perched on the edge of the sofa, my heart pounding. He remained standing, like he couldn't quite settle. I've been thinking about what you said. About your son, about the birthmark, about everything. And I need to be honest with you about something. He paused, clearly struggling with his words. 4 years ago, when I came to Seattle, I told people I'd built my business overseas. That's true, as far as it goes. But what I don't talk about is why I was overseas in the first place, or what happened before that. I held my breath. 15 years ago, he continued, I woke up in a hospital in Manila with no idea who I was. I'd been pulled from the water after a typhoon hit the ferry I was apparently traveling on. I had severe head trauma, broken ribs, and complete amnesia. No ID, no papers, nothing. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Tears began streaming down my face, but I didn't make a sound. A couple who ran a small import business, good people, they took me in when the hospital released me. They helped me, gave me a job, eventually adopted me as their adult son. They gave me the name James Chen. I tried for months to remember who I was, but there was just blank space where my past should have been. Eventually, I stopped trying and focused on building a new life. He finally sat down, and I could see how exhausted he was. So when you came here with your photos and your story about a missing son, it stirred up a lot of complicated feelings. Because you might be right. I might be your Michael. But I have no memory of it. None. And that terrifies me. The birthmark, I started. I know. When you mentioned it, I felt something. Like an echo of recognition. But I still can't remember anything concrete from before the hospital. We sat in silence for a moment. So why did you call me back? I finally asked. His expression crumpled with emotion. Because of my son, Nathan. He's 7 years old, and he's dying. My heart clenched. He has end-stage liver disease and needs a transplant urgently. We've been on the donor list for 8 months, but his blood type is extremely rare, Rh-negative AB. We haven't found a compatible donor, and time is running out. Suddenly, I understood. I have Rh-negative AB blood type. I know. I looked at your medical information. I'm sorry, that was an invasion of privacy, but I was desperate. He leaned forward, his voice breaking. Mrs. Richardson, I still don't know if I believe your story completely. My mind tells me it's too convenient, too perfect. But my son is dying, and you might be his only chance. He looked at me with anguish in his eyes. I'm asking, begging, would you still be willing to be tested for compatibility? Even though I've been hostile and suspicious? Even though I might never be able to remember being your son? I crossed to him without hesitation and took his hands in mine. Of course I will. If Nathan is your son, then he's my grandson, whether you remember me or not. We'll do the testing. The relief on his face was overwhelming. Thank you, thank you. I've already contacted Seattle Medical Center's transplant team. They can see us this afternoon. I'm ready whenever you are. He nodded, then looked at me with something like hope mixed with fear. And Mrs. Richardson? If the tests show we're compatible, and if that suggests you really are my mother. Maybe we could do a DNA test too? To know for sure? Yes, I said through my tears. Yes, absolutely. The testing took most of the afternoon. Blood draws, tissue typing, cardiac tests, imaging scans. James sat in the waiting room while I went through everything, and when I came out, I found him on the phone, speaking quietly to his wife about their son. 2 hours later, we were called into Dr. Martinez's office. She looked at both of us with an expression of amazement. Well, she said, the preliminary results are remarkable. Mrs. Richardson, you're an exceptionally good match for Nathan. Not just blood type, but tissue compatibility as well. Your HLA markers align at a level one rarely see outside of immediate biological family. James gripped the arms of his chair. What exactly does that mean? It means this level of compatibility typically only occurs between parents and children, or occasionally between siblings. For two supposedly unrelated individuals, this is extraordinary. If we proceed with the transplant, the chances of rejection are significantly lower than normal. She looked between us meaningfully, clearly wondering about our relationship. However, Dr. Martinez continued, her tone growing serious, I do have some concerns about Mrs. Richardson as a donor. My stomach dropped. Your cardiac tests showed some abnormalities, arrhythmia and left ventricular hypertrophy. At your age, and with these pre-existing heart conditions, the surgery would carry significant risks. Living donor liver transplantation is a major operation even for perfectly healthy individuals. In your case, I'd estimate the risk of life-threatening complications at about 15 to 20%. That's 3 to 4 times higher than for a typical healthy donor. James stood abruptly. Then we're not doing it. Absolutely not. We'll find another donor. Mr. Chen, with Nathan's rare blood type and the antibodies he's developed, finding another donor with this degree of compatibility could take years. I'm not sure Nathan has years. I don't care, James said flatly. I won't risk someone's life. I won't, he stopped himself, but we all knew what he'd been about to say. I won't risk someone's life who might be my mother. I want to do it, I said firmly. No, it's my decision, not yours. Mrs. Richardson, Dr. Martinez said gently, you understand what I'm telling you? There's a real possibility you might not survive this surgery. You could have a stroke, a heart attack, organ failure. This is serious. I understand completely. And I still want to do it. James whirled on me, his composure finally cracking. Why? Why would you risk your life for a child you've never even met? Because you think I'm your son? What if you're wrong? What if I'm just some stranger who happens to look like Michael? I stood and faced him. Then I'll have helped save a child's life. That's reason enough. But James Michael, whatever you want to call yourself, I'm not wrong. You are my son. I know it here. I placed my hand over my heart. And that little boy is my grandson. So yes, I'm willing to take the risk. His eyes filled with tears. I don't understand you. You're a parent, I said simply. You'd do anything for Nathan, wouldn't you? You'd give your life for his without hesitation. This is me doing what any mother would do. What any grandmother would do. We stood there, the distance between us filled with 15 years of loss and confusion and pain. Finally, James nodded, his voice rough with emotion. Dr. Martinez, what do we need to do next? Let's schedule the surgery, she said. And Mr. Chen, if you'd like to arrange a DNA test as well, I can have someone collect samples today. James looked at me. Is that okay? More than okay, I said. I want you to know the truth. A technician came and took samples from both of us. The results would take 48 hours. The surgery was scheduled for 1 week from that day. Over the next few days, I spent time at the hospital with Nathan. He was a pale, thin little boy with dark circles under his eyes, but his smile was bright when James introduced us. "Nathan, this is Mrs. Richardson. She's a friend who's going to help you get better. Are you the angel Daddy told me about?" Nathan asked in his small voice. I had to fight back tears. "I'm not an angel, sweetheart. Just someone who wants to see you healthy and strong." I read him stories and played quiet games when he had energy. His mother Emma was warm and grateful, though clearly puzzled by the whole situation. James and I spent time together too, mostly at the hospital. He asked me about Michael's childhood, and I told him stories. His love of baseball, his terrible jokes, the time he tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner and nearly burned down the house. James listened with intense concentration, as if studying for an exam. "I wish I could remember," he said more than once. "Sometimes when you talk, I feel something. Like almost recognition. But then it slips away." On the third day before the surgery, James arrived at the hospital looking shaken. He was carrying a leather folder. "I have something to show you," he said. "I went through some boxes my adoptive parents left me. I found these." He opened the folder. Inside were old hospital records from Manila, dated 15 years ago. Patient name, unknown male. But there were details: approximate age 22 to 25, distinguishing marks: 3 freckles behind left ear in triangular formation. Probable nationality American, condition severe trauma, complete amnesia. "They found a waterlogged passport in my clothes," James said quietly. But it was too damaged to read. The only thing they could make out was what might have been a first name, Mike or Michael, they thought. But it was too destroyed to be certain. My hands trembled as I looked at the records. "Why didn't you ever try to find out who you were?" I asked. "I did at first. The hospital put out notices, contacted embassies, filed reports. But no one ever came forward. After a while, I figured if I had family, they'd have been looking for me. When no one showed up, I assumed I was alone in the world. It was easier to build a new life than to keep searching for a past that didn't seem to exist." "We looked," I said urgently. "We looked everywhere. David spent years searching. But the typhoon destroyed so many records, displaced so many people. We focused on Thailand and Vietnam because that's where you said you were going. We never thought to look in the Philippines." James nodded slowly. "The ferry was traveling from Thailand to Vietnam. The typhoon pushed us hundreds of miles off course before the ship broke apart." That afternoon, James arranged for a private DNA test. A technician came to the hospital, took our samples, and promised results within 48 hours, 2 days before the surgery. "We'll know before the operation," James said after the technician left. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself back at my house, in David's study, the one room I'd barely entered since his death. I sat in his chair, surrounded by his books and his half-finished plans. And that's when I noticed a small locked drawer on the left side of his desk. I'd never been able to open it. David had always said he kept work documents in there. But now I wondered. I searched everywhere for a key. Finally, I found one taped underneath the desk, so typical of David, hiding things in plain sight. My hands shook as I unlocked the drawer. Inside was a single leather-bound journal with David's name embossed on the cover. I opened it carefully. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, just days after Michael disappeared. "I won't give up. I can't. He's out there somewhere, and I'll find him. I have to believe that." I read through pages and pages of David's search. His hope gradually giving way to desperate determination, but he never stopped looking. Never. Then I reached entries from 3 months before David's death, and my heart started pounding. March 5th, met with James Chen from Summit Construction today. The moment he walked into my office, I couldn't breathe. It's him. It's Michael. I know my own son. Same face, older now. Same gestures. And when he turned 3 freckles behind his left ear. The birthmark. It's Michael. But he doesn't know me. He introduced himself as James Chen with no recognition in his eyes at all. How is this possible? What happened to him? I read on through tears, my hands shaking. March 15th, I've been researching amnesia, head trauma, identity loss. It's possible. If Michael was in an accident, if he suffered brain damage, he could have completely forgotten his previous life. It would explain everything. April 18th, I finally got what I need. Had lunch with James yesterday. I managed to keep his water glass when the server cleared the table. I have a DNA testing kit at home. I'll send both samples to the lab tomorrow. 1 week until results. Then I'll know for certain. April 25th, results should arrive in the next few days. I've been thinking about how to tell Sarah. How do you tell someone their son they've mourned for 15 years is alive? She'll be angry I didn't tell her sooner, but I had to be absolutely sure. Then the final entry, dated April 29th, the day before David's accident. The results came this morning. 99.9% probability parent and child. It's official. It's proven. It's real. James Chen is our Michael. Our son is alive. I sat in my office for an hour just crying. After 15 years of searching, of hoping, of not knowing he's alive. I'm telling Sarah tomorrow. I can't keep this from her another day. Together, we'll figure out how to approach Michael, how to help him understand who he really is. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, Michael comes home. But tomorrow never came. The next day, David died in a car accident on his way to meet me for lunch. The lunch where he was going to tell me everything. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest, sobbing. David had found him. David had known. He'd gotten the proof. And he died before he could tell either of us. But he'd left the evidence. He'd left the truth. The next morning, I brought the journal to the hospital. James was in Nathan's room, reading him a story. When he saw my face, he stood immediately. What's wrong? I handed him the journal. Read it. The last few months of entries. I sat with Nathan while James walked to the window and began reading. I watched his face as he turned the pages. Confusion gave way to shock, then to something deeper: recognition, grief, and wonder all mixed together. When he reached the final entry, he stood motionless for a long moment, staring out at the city. Then his shoulders began to shake. He was crying silently, his hand pressed against the glass. He knew, James whispered. My father knew who I was. He found me. And I never knew him. I was sitting across from him in meetings, and I didn't know him. He turned around, tears streaming down his face, and suddenly he was crossing the room, dropping to his knees in front of me, sobbing. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry I didn't remember. I'm sorry I didn't know Dad. I'm sorry for all of it. I wrapped my arms around him, my son, my Michael, and held him while he cried. None of this is your fault, I said, stroking his hair. You didn't choose to forget. You didn't choose any of this. But 15 years you and Dad suffered for 15 years, and I was alive the whole time. And now we've found each other. That's what matters. Your father never gave up, and because of his persistence, we're here now. Together. Emma was crying too, watching us. Even Nathan looked awed by the emotion in the room. James finally pulled back, wiping his eyes. The DNA results come tomorrow. But I don't need them anymore. I know who I am. He looked at me directly. I'm Michael Richardson. I'm your son. Yes, I breathed. Yes, you are. I wish I could have known him. My father. Our father. I wish I could remember him. You did know him, in a way. These last 3 months, you worked together, talked together. He got to see the man you'd become. And Michael, he was so proud of you. That night, the night before my surgery, Michael sat beside my hospital bed after visiting hours had ended. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you right after finding you?" "You won't," I said. "I'm going to be fine, and so is Nathan." "You can't know that." "No, but I choose to believe it." "And Michael? Whatever happens, I need you to know that these past 2 weeks, getting to know you again, meeting Emma and Nathan, it's been the greatest gift. I got my son back. That's worth everything." He gripped my hand tightly. "Mom," he said, and the words sounded both strange and perfect. "I love you. I don't remember loving you before, but I love you now." "I love you too, sweetheart." I never stopped. The surgery began at 6 a.m. Michael wasn't allowed in the operating room, but he'd arranged for updates every 30 minutes. He sat in the waiting room with Emma, both of them silent and tense. Nathan was in another part of the hospital, being prepped for his portion of the transplant. 2 operating rooms, 2 teams of surgeons, 2 lives hanging in the balance. 6:30 a.m. Mrs. Richardson is under anesthesia. Beginning initial incision. Michael stood and paced. 7 a.m. Procedure progressing as expected. 7:30 a.m. Successfully accessing liver. Beginning resection. Then, at 8:15 a.m., complication. Patient experiencing cardiac arrhythmia. Stabilizing. Michael's blood ran cold. Emma grabbed his hand. 8:45 a.m., patient stable. Resuming procedure. The surgery that was supposed to take 4 hours stretched to 5, then 6. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, at 11:30 a.m., Dr. Martinez emerged, still in her scrubs. Michael jumped to his feet. "Nathan's transplant was successful," she said, and Emma burst into tears of relief. "The organ is functioning well. He's in recovery and doing beautifully." "And Mrs. Richardson?" Michael's voice was hoarse. Dr. Martinez's expression grew somber. "The transplant itself was successful. We removed the liver segment without major complications. However, she experienced significant cardiac stress during the procedure. Her heart went into arrhythmia twice, and we had to spend considerable time stabilizing her. She's currently in the ICU, and the next 24 hours are critical." Michael felt the world tilt. "Is she going to make it?" "I don't know," Dr. Martinez said honestly. "She's strong and she's fighting, but her heart is very weak. The next day will tell us everything." Michael was allowed to see me briefly in the ICU. I was unconscious, intubated, surrounded by machines that beeped and whirred. I looked small and fragile. He took my hand carefully. "Mom," he whispered, "you have to pull through this. Please. I just found you. I can't lose you now. Nathan wants to meet his grandmother. Please don't leave us." But the machines just kept beeping, offering no answers. The hours crawled by. Michael refused to leave the ICU waiting room. He slept in an uncomfortable chair, lived on bad coffee and fear. The next afternoon, Emma brought Nathan by in a wheelchair. The little boy was weak but alert, a teddy bear clutched in his arms. "Is the angel lady okay?" Nathan asked. "She's very sick," Michael told him honestly. "But she's fighting hard. Can I see her?" Against protocol but with Dr. Martinez's quiet permission, they wheeled Nathan into the ICU for just a moment. The little boy looked at me with wide eyes, then carefully set his teddy bear on the bed beside my hand. "This is Mr. Buttons," he told my unconscious form in his small voice. "He helps me when I'm scared. You can borrow him until you feel better, okay?" Something shifted in that moment. The nurses later told Michael that it was right around then that my vital signs began to stabilize. The dangerous arrhythmias became less frequent. By the second day, I was showing definite signs of improvement. The doctors cautiously downgraded my condition from critical to serious. By the third day, they removed the breathing tube. I woke up slowly, my eyes fluttering open to see Michael sitting beside my bed, holding my hand. Nathan's teddy bear was still tucked under my other arm. When Michael saw my eyes open, his face broke into a smile even as tears streamed down his cheeks. "Mom," he said, "welcome back." My voice was barely a whisper. "Nathan? He's perfect. The transplant took beautifully. He's already up and walking around, asking about you constantly." I managed a weak smile. "Good. You scared us," Michael said, his voice cracking. "You scared me so badly. I thought I was going to lose you right after finding you." "Still here," I whispered. "Too stubborn to die." He laughed through his tears. "Yes, you are. Incredibly, impossibly stubborn." Over the next 2 weeks, both Nathan and I recovered steadily. I was moved from ICU to a regular room. Nathan visited me every day, bringing drawings he'd made, chattering about what he wanted to do when we were both better. The connection between us was immediate and natural. He seemed to instinctively understand that I was family, that I was his grandmother. He'd climb carefully onto my bed and tell me stories, or ask me to read to him, or just hold my hand while he watched cartoons. Emma brought photo albums showing me the past 7 years of Nathan's life. His first smile, first steps, first day of school. "You missed so much," she said. "But we'll make sure you're there for everything going forward." Michael spent hours in my room too. Slowly, carefully, we pieced together his lost memories. I told him stories from his childhood, showed him videos on my phone. Some of it triggered faint echoes of recognition. "It's like looking at someone else's life through frosted glass," he explained. "I can see shapes and shadows, but not clear pictures. But it feels right. It feels true." "It is true," I assured him. "And even if you never fully remember, we're together now. That's what matters." 3 weeks after the surgery, I was finally discharged. Michael and Emma insisted I stay with them rather than going home to my empty house. They'd prepared a beautiful guest suite on the first floor. It was strange at first, moving into my son's house, stepping into his life as an outsider. But everyone worked to make me feel welcome. Emma included me in family decisions. Nathan wanted me to tuck him in every night. And Michael checked on me constantly, bringing me tea, making sure I was comfortable. About a month after the surgery, Michael made an announcement over dinner. "I've made a decision," he said. "I'm going to legally change my name back to Michael Richardson. I'll keep Chen as a middle name to honor my adoptive parents, but I want my real name back." "Are you sure?" Emma asked gently. "That's going to be complicated with the business." "I'm sure. James Chen was who I had to be when I didn't know who I was. But now I know. I'm Michael Richardson, son of Sarah and David Richardson. That's who I want to be." He looked at me. "If that's okay with you, Mom." I couldn't speak through the tears, so I just nodded. "There's something else," Michael continued. "I want to renovate Dad's old study at your house. Turn it into a memorial room. Keep his books, his drafting table, his journal. A place where we can remember him, and where Nathan can learn about his grandfather." "That's beautiful," I managed to say. "And I want Nathan to have Dad's baseball glove collection. Maybe Nathan will carry on that tradition." Nathan's eyes lit up. "Really, Dad? Can I really have them?" "You can. Your grandfather would want that." On the first anniversary of David's death, we held a memorial service at his grave. Michael had commissioned a new headstone with an addition. "David Richardson, beloved husband and father, who never stopped searching, and found what he sought." Michael placed a baseball on the grave, one from David's collection. "Thank you, Dad," he said quietly. "For never giving up. For finding me. For bringing our family back together." I placed flowers beside the baseball. "Thank you, my love. You gave me our son back. That's the greatest gift anyone could give." We stood together, 3 generations of Richardsons bound by love that had survived death, amnesia, and 15 years of separation. That evening, back at home, I found Michael in David's memorial study, reading through the journal again. "I was looking at the early entries," he said. "Right after I disappeared. Dad was so determined, so certain he'd find me. That was your father. When he loved someone, he loved them completely and forever. I wish I could remember him better. I have feelings, impressions, but not clear memories. Then I'll tell you stories. I'll tell you everything I remember. We'll keep him alive that way, through our memories, through Nathan, through the family we've rebuilt." "Do you think he knows?" Michael asked. "Wherever he is, do you think he knows we're together?" I thought about David's final journal entry, his joy at finding our son, his plans for our reunion. "Yes," I said with certainty. "I think he knows. I think he's been watching over us, guiding us back together." "I hope so." Michael closed the journal gently. "I hope he knows I'm grateful. That I love him, even if I can't fully remember him. That I'm going to be the kind of father he was, the kind who never gives up on his children." "You already are," I told him. 6 months later, Nathan's health had improved dramatically. He was back in school, playing soccer, living the normal life of a healthy 8-year-old. And he never let me forget that I was the grandmother who saved his life. "You're like a superhero, Grandma," he told me one day. "You gave me part of your body so I could live. That's way better than any comic book." I'd moved permanently into Michael and Emma's house. My suite had become filled with photos, old ones of Michael as a child, newer ones of Nathan, pictures of David, images of our reunited family. Every wall told the story of a family torn apart and brought back together. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in the garden watching Nathan play when Michael came and sat beside me. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "About what Dad wrote in his journal. That final entry, where he said, 'Tomorrow, Michael comes home.'" Yes? He was right. It just took a little longer than he expected. But I did come home. We all came home. I took his hand. "Yes, we did. I'm starting to remember more," Michael said quietly. "Little things. The smell of your cooking. The sound of Dad's laugh. Playing catch in the backyard. They're not complete memories, but they're there. Like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together." "Take your time," I said. "There's no rush. We have all the time in the world now." Nathan ran over to us, breathless and happy. "Grandma, Dad, come play with me." Michael stood and held out his hand to help me up. "Come on, Mom. Our grandson is calling. Our grandson. Our family. Our second chance." As we walked across the lawn together, I looked up at the sky and whispered a silent thank you to David. "Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for believing when no one else did. Thank you for finding him." And in the warmth of the afternoon sun, I could almost feel David's presence, could almost hear his voice. Saying what he'd written in that final journal entry, "Michael comes home." Life had taken everything from me and given it back transformed. My husband was gone, but he'd left me the greatest gift, our son, returned from the impossible. We were all scarred by what we'd been through, but we were together. We were family. And we were, finally and forever, whole. That night, after Nathan was in bed and the house was quiet, I stood at my window looking out at the Seattle skyline. The same view I'd had from that funeral home so many months ago. Somewhere in this city, 15 years ago, a young man had boarded a plane to start an adventure. That adventure had taken him through tragedy and transformation, through loss and amnesia, through years of living as someone else. But it had also brought him home. The circle was complete. The lost was found. The broken was healed. And somewhere, I knew, David was smiling. "Welcome home, son," I whispered to the stars. "Welcome home."